Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a new story to share, so let's begin. My name is Vance, and I want to tell you a story about how I learned the hard way the lessons of betrayal. I believed in my wife, Winnie. I never thought my marriage would crash and burn because of infidelity. But here we are. Funny thing is, I always used to joke with Winnie about cheating. Whenever we heard about one of our friends or associates getting divorced because of an affair, I would shake my head and say, if I ever catch my wife cheating, that's it. No second chances. It's just something I threw out there during conversations. And every single time, Winnie would laugh and say, why would a married woman who has loved cheat? That makes no sense. She sounded so sure, so confident, like the idea of stepping out on her husband was something she could never even consider. And I believed her. But here's the irony. The woman who swore she would never cheat ended up doing exactly that. When I married Winnie, I meant every word of my vows. I wasn't just in it for the good times. I was ready to stand by her through everything. I worked hard to provide for us, to make sure we had a stable, comfortable life. We always talked about having kids, even before we got married. It wasn't just a dream for the future. It was something we both desperately wanted. But life had other plans. Since our wedding, Winnie had 2 miscarriages, and each one took a bigger toll on our relationship than the last. The second one, especially, changed everything. After that, Winnie wasn't the same. She withdrew into herself, barely spoke unless she had to. And when she did, it was as if she was just going through the motions. I could see the pain in her eyes, and I felt it too, but no matter what I did, it never seemed to reach her. I knew she was grieving, and I didn't want to make things harder for her. So I stepped up. I gave her space when she needed it, supported her in every way I could, and avoided bringing up anything that might remind her of what we'd lost. I figured that with time, things would get better, that eventually, she'd find her way back to me. But I was wrong. At first, I told myself that her distance was just part of the healing process. That one day, she'd wake up and things would start to feel normal again. But months passed, and instead of getting better, it got worse. Winnie avoided intimacy completely. She started coming home later and later, always with the same excuse. Work had been crazy. She had to stay late. There was too much on her plate. I didn't question it. I wanted to believe she was telling the truth. After everything we had been through, the last thing on my mind was the possibility that she was lying. But then a friend of mine, someone who worked in the same company as Winnie, called me one day. His words were simple, but they changed everything. Watch your wife and that guy from her office. He was serious and sounded like he knew something I didn't. That was the moment the doubt crept in. The moment I realized that her distance wasn't just grief. It's probably something else entirely. I didn't confront her right away. I wasn't about to make accusations without proof. That's how men get played, acting on emotion instead of evidence. So, I started paying attention. I watched how she behaved when she got home. I saw how she never seemed in a rush to get home anymore, how she always had an excuse for why she was staying late at work. But the real test? That would be her messages. People slip up in texts. No matter how careful they are, there's always something, a phrase, a name, a late-night notification, that gives them away. I knew that if Winnie was doing something behind my back, her phone would have the answers. And from that moment on, I became a man on a mission. I just needed the right moment to check. One night, Winnie came home late again, looking drained, like she had just wrapped up the hardest day of her life. She barely said a word to me, just muttered something about being tired, then went straight to the bathroom. I heard the water running as I sat on the bed, pretending to scroll through my phone. When she finally came out, she didn't even respond to my question about her day. She just slipped under the covers, still glued to her phone, typing away. I waited. I didn't say anything. I just watched as her blinks got slower, her breathing steadied, and then eventually, the phone slipped from her fingers onto the bed. She was sleeping soundly. Her phone screen was still on. And not just on, unlocked. I reached for it without thinking twice. The first thing I saw was a name I recognized, the guy from her office. My friend had warned me about him. He was the one she was chatting with before passing out. But there it was. Their entire conversation laid out in front of me. It was flirty, casual, and so disgustingly easy, like they had been doing this for a long time. I scrolled up, and my stomach twisted as I read through their old messages. "I wish you could spend the night," he had texted her. And she responded with a line that broke me into 1,000 pieces. "I want that too, but my husband will suspect I'm cheating." I read that line again, and again, then keep scrolling. Message after message, they joked, they laughed, they made plans to meet up after work. My wife, the woman thought was just struggling with grief, was cheating on me. She knew it was wrong. She knew it would destroy me. And she did it anyway. I wanted to throw the phone. I wanted to wake her up and demand answers. But I didn't. I took a deep breath, swallowed the rage burning in my chest, and did the only thing that made sense. I took screenshots of everything, transferred the screenshots to my phone, then deleted them from hers. She wouldn't know what I had seen. I placed the phone back, exactly as it was, and sat there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. I had just watched my marriage crumble in real time, and the person responsible was sleeping peacefully beside me. I woke up the next morning with my mind made up. I needed to be smart about this. So, I started with the mortgage. We had bought the house together 2 years ago, after renting for a while. Both of our names were on the loan, meaning if we ever split, I'd still be tied to it financially. The court would likely award her the house, and if she couldn't keep up with payments, I'd be on the hook for it too. That wasn't happening. I wasn't going to let her ruin me, financially, after already destroying our marriage. At breakfast, I kept my tone casual, like I was just passing along some important financial advice. I told her that our financial advisor had warned me about an impending economic downturn and suggested that it would be smarter to put the mortgage in just one person's name. I made it sound logical, something responsible homeowners should do to avoid complications in the future. I told her it made the most sense to transfer the mortgage to her name alone. She didn't even question it. She just nodded and agreed. What she didn't know was that no financial advisor had told me anything. There was no looming crisis. The only crisis was the one I was about to bring down on her. This wasn't about financial security. It was about cutting my ties to her before I filed for divorce. Once my name was off that mortgage, she would be the sole owner. That meant the house would be completely her responsibility. If she kept up with the payments, fine. But if she missed even one, it would hit her credit, not mine. I was making sure that when I walked away, I wouldn't be left struggling. People always say that catching your spouse cheating guarantees a win in divorce court. But that's not how it works. Courts don't run on emotions. Even if I had those text messages, she could claim they were just harmless flirting. And judges eat that kind of excuse up. I needed solid proof, something undeniable. So, before making any move, I booked a session with a divorce lawyer. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with and how to protect myself. The lawyer told me that while cheating could help my case, I had to be smart about how I used the information. The texts were good, but I needed more clear visual evidence of Winnie being physically involved with this guy. That was when he recommended a private investigator, a professional who knew how to gather airtight evidence that would hold up in court. The investigator wasted no time. Within days, he was trailing Winnie and her coworker, tracking their movements after work. He didn't just take random pictures of them talking. He got exactly what I needed. He captured photos of Winnie leaving her lover's house late at night. That alone was damaging. But he didn't stop there. He recorded videos of her getting into her car after spending hours there. It was exactly what it looked like. When the investigator sent me the files, I sat there staring at my phone for a long time. Seeing those messages had hurt, but this was something else. How naturally she lived a double life. I saved every single file, backed them up in multiple places. I was a man preparing for war. I knew that if I was going to come out of this mess without being financially crippled, I had to act fast. The system isn't built to protect men in these situations. Even with all the proof I had, there was no guarantee that the court wouldn't still favor Winnie in the divorce. I had seen it happen before, cheaters walking away with half of everything, leaving the faithful spouse to pick up the pieces. That wasn't going to be me. So, I started moving money out of our joint account, little by little. Not enough to trigger suspicion right away, but enough to make sure that when the time came, she wouldn't have a cent of mine to claim. At first, it went unnoticed. Winnie had left most of our finances to me, trusting that I would handle everything. That trust made things easier. But then, one day, I got a call. Winnie's voice was sharp, but she tried to keep her tone light, probably not wanting to come off as accusatory too soon. "Hey, babe, I just got a bunch of alerts from the bank. There's been a lot of withdrawals from our joint account. What's going on?" I didn't hesitate. "Oh, yeah," I said casually, like it was nothing. I spoke with our financial advisor. With the economy looking shaky, he recommended that we move some of our money into safer investments, hard assets, things that won't lose value if the market crashes. I could tell she was still processing it, so I kept talking. "It's nothing to worry about. It's all going into smart investments. We're just protecting ourselves for the future." I expected her to ask more questions, maybe push for details, but she didn't. She just sighed and said, "Okay, I just wanted to be sure." What she didn't know was that there was no financial advisor. There was no safe investment plan. The only person I was protecting was myself. Every dollar I pulled out was going into assets that the court wouldn't be able to trace back to me. Luxury watches, high-end jewelry, and valuable paintings. Things that could be sold for cash anytime, anywhere, without leaving a paper trail. If I had simply moved the money to another account, Winnie's lawyer could argue that it was still marital property. But physical assets? Those were different. They wouldn't show up in any bank statements, and once they were out of my hands, they were untouchable. I needed to store them somewhere safe, somewhere completely outside Winnie's reach. So I arranged for everything to be secured in a private safe in Mexico. Why Mexico? Because U.S. courts have no jurisdiction there. If she tried to go after me in court and claim I hid money from her, there would be no way for her to track down those assets. By the time she realized the money was gone, it wouldn't exist in any way that she could legally fight for. I had been waiting for the right moment. Then one Saturday afternoon, the private investigator sent me a photo that sealed everything. It was Winnie sitting across from her lover at some restaurant downtown. She looked happy. They were sharing a meal, leaning in close, completely lost in their little world. I just stared at the image for a long time. She had told me that morning that she was heading out to run some errands. That was the exact phrase she used. And here she was, running errands by laughing over lunch with the man she was sleeping with behind my back. I wasn't even angry at that moment. That part had passed. Now it was just about executing the plan I had spent months setting up. Without wasting time, I packed every single one of my belongings. I made sure to double-check, ensuring I wouldn't have to return for anything. The house still looked the same, but all traces of me were gone. It was no longer my home. It was just a place I had been staying in with someone who had no respect for me. Before leaving, I placed the divorce papers right in the middle of the dining table. I wanted them to be the first thing she saw when she walked in. There was no need for a note, no need for any dramatic explanations. The papers, along with my absence, would say everything for me. She would know exactly why. I had already signed my part. She just needed to add hers. Then I left. But I wasn't done yet. I wasn't going to miss the moment she walked into the house, all smiles from her little date, only to find her world flipped upside down. Thanks to the home security camera, I didn't have to imagine her reaction. I could witness it firsthand. I sat in my car, parked a few blocks away, watching my phone screen as the motion detector alerted me that she had arrived. She stepped inside, still wearing that same bright, satisfied smile from her lunch date. But the second her eyes landed on the papers, the shift was instant. She stopped in her tracks, the happiness draining from her face like someone had flipped a switch. She walked toward the table slowly, picking up the papers, flipping through them, like her brain couldn't fully process what she was looking at. Then she panicked. She rushed toward the bedroom, probably thinking I was in there. But I wasn't. And I could only imagine what was going through her mind when she saw the empty closet, the missing suitcases, the undeniable proof that I was gone. I couldn't see her reaction from inside the room since there were no cameras there. But when she returned to the dining table, she was crying. She started pressing her phone furiously, and for a moment, I thought she was about to call me. But my phone never rang. Instead, she put the phone to her ear and started talking to someone else. Maybe it was her lover. Maybe it was her best friend. I didn't know, and I didn't care. Because in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. When she finally called, I let it ring. I wasn't interested in hearing whatever excuse she had. Then came the voicemails, one after another. At first, she was crying, begging me to pick up. She swore she had made a mistake, that she loved me, that we could work things out. When I didn't respond, the messages started changing. She got angry, calling me heartless. Then came the texts, a mix of apologies and frustration. I ignored them all. I had already made up my mind. She made her choices, and now she had to live with them. At first, she was too busy trying to win me back to realize the financial damage I had done. But once she checked the joint account and saw the balance sitting at zero, reality hit her. That's when she stopped begging and started fighting. She got a lawyer and tried to come after me, claiming I had stolen our savings. But in court, she had no case. I told them I had taken the money to invest based on a financial advisor's recommendation, but the investments had failed. Of course, that was a complete lie. The truth was, the money was locked up in assets she would never be able to trace. She could suspect all she wanted, but suspicions don't win court cases. Evidence does. And she had none. Then there was the house. Since I had convinced her to transfer the mortgage solely into her name, the court saw it as her responsibility. It didn't matter that we had originally taken the mortgage together. On paper, she owned it now, which meant she had to pay for it. And with the high monthly payments, that was going to be a struggle. She might have thought she could come after me for alimony. But that door was slammed shut the moment my lawyer presented undeniable proof of her affair. No judge was going to award spousal support to a cheating wife who had been sneaking around with a coworker. She had betrayed the marriage, and legally, that meant she had no right to any financial support for me. In the end, she lost. Everything played out exactly how I planned. The divorce was finalized within a few months, faster than even I expected. No money, no claim to me, and a house she could barely afford. She walked into court thinking she could fight me, but she walked out realizing she had already lost long before she even stepped into the courtroom. 3 months had passed since the divorce was finalized, and by then, Winnie was just a bad memory to me. I had moved on, or at least I was trying to, but there was still one thing left unfinished. She had walked away from our marriage after betraying me, thinking she could keep everything else intact, her job, her reputation, her stability. But that wasn't how this was going to end. I had been patient, watching from a distance. I knew she was still working at the same company, acting like nothing had happened. But the thing is, workplace affairs don't just hurt marriages. They compromise professional environments, too. And in her position, she should have known better. She held a high-ranking position, one that required a certain level of professionalism and integrity. I gathered everything I had, then sent it directly to HR, addressed to the highest level of management. I made sure my name was attached, so they knew exactly who was bringing this to their attention. The company had strict policies about relationships between supervisors and employees, and once they saw the evidence, they had no choice but to act. It didn't take long. Within a week, Winnie was called into a meeting, and from what I later heard, it wasn't a pleasant one. She had no way to talk her way out of it, no excuses that could undo the proof staring them in the face. She was fired on the spot. Years of building her career wiped out in a single decision, the same way she had wiped out our marriage for a cheap, meaningless fling. I wasn't there to see her reaction, but I could imagine it. The panic. The realization that she wasn't just losing a job, she was losing her financial security. I sat back and thought about everything that happened. All the years I spent loving her, building a life with her, trying to be the best husband I could be. And for what? So she could sneak around with some guy from her office? She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew it would destroy me if I ever found out, but she did it anyway. And for that, I made sure she paid the price. She played me, so I played the system. And now, let's see who life buries first. What do you think? Was I too cold? Too Too calculated? Or did she deserve every bit of what came her way? If you were in my position, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and share.